Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Justin Goldman. Justin, absolute legend in the goalie space. Got 3 fantastic books, maybe more I'm not aware of. Global Goalie Retreat, which is fantastic. Goalie Guild, Lift the Mask Challenge, just doing great things in the hockey world for goalies. And, technical stuff is great, but also the mental side, which is truly amazing. And talking about mental health, because it's a lonely position, man.
It's a lonely position, and it can be full of so many emotional and physical challenges, obviously. So there's got to be a space for goalies to go that's safe, and that, really is a place where they can have conversations about just what they're going through. Because goalies go through a lot of different things when they're alone in the crease, and they don't always have the support, especially at a younger age. So that's really a big passion of mine, is just giving goalies that outlet and that safe space to go to have a conversation or just get the help that they need.
Yes. Longtime listeners, I haven't talked goalies in way too long, but longtime listeners will know my brother's a goalie, played AAA for a long time. So I know enough to be really dumb about this stuff. And obviously as a shooter, I'm very interested in all of this stuff. But I do like to start on that part where we're talking about lonely and a lot of the mental game. Because especially in the NHL, like the difference between goalie maybe not number 1, 2, and 3, those guys are kind of freaks sometimes. Like that comes to mind. UC Saros, like good luck trying to do that.
Right.
But everyone else, like the margins are so thin, and it's like basically a mental game of who's feeling confident in their abilities at that time. And you mentioned something I think is really important, especially for youth players and parents and coaches. Like they don't really have anyone to go to as they start out on this journey. And it's a really a lifelong journey of learning to manage ourselves, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And that kind of leads into what you normally talk about when you do your books. I'm curious to hear the inspiration behind it a little bit, and really what you're trying to attack. And if you can give us maybe a cliff note, like what are some lessons from your books? Because for me, it was kind of like the inner game of tennis, where it was kind of like, how do we manage ourselves, talk to ourselves, little tools, tricks of the trade, and understand that, okay, we're not alone in this. Like we may be dealing with it by ourselves, especially on a team where like you may have 1, 2 other people. That's it. But you're not the only one out there. Like there's a bunch of people going through the same thing.
Yeah. I think you set the stage very cleanly for me, because it really is, you are alone on an island. And for me personally, I grew up in a very non-traditional hockey background. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, North Texas. And I was that first wave of youth hockey players in the Dallas area when the Stars came from Minnesota. So I personally experienced a lack of resources and a lack of a goalie coach and a lack of adults that understood what it meant to be a goalie. Nobody in my family was a goalie, right? I had no one to turn to help guide my journey as a young goaltender at the ages of 12, 13, 14, 15, these really crucial ages for, emotional and social development. So as someone who experienced a lack of those resources, when I got to college and I was old enough to know, hey, this is something that a lot of other goalies are dealing with in all different parts of the country, there is a severe lack of education and resources for the goaltending position. And that's what inspired me to go on my journey and start the Goalie Guild and start a foundation, and then obviously write the books. I was so blessed to cross paths with Mike Valley, who's been a mentor of mine for so many years now. And at the time, ironically, he was the goalie coach for the Dallas Stars when we crossed paths. So it's kind of serendipitous in a way. And we both just realized that, like, these goaltenders that make it to the elite level have developed so many amazing strategies for how to combat a lot of the obstacles and challenges that you mentioned at the beginning of this question. How do they overcome these, bad games, or a lack of confidence, or teammates that aren't always supportive, or a coach that has no clue what it means to be a goalie? These are things that every goalie will face at some point in their journey. And it's always amazing to be able to talk to NHL goalies that have walked the walk, and to be able to just pick their brain about how they developed their own strategies. And what's amazing is that the more goalies you talk to, we were fortunate to write the first book, and we talked to some legends like Pekka Rinne and Jimmy Howard and Marty Turco, guys that have played hundreds of NHL games. They all have their own unique strategies that they learned their own way. And I think it's empowering for younger goalies, whether you're, just starting out at the peewee rank, or you're in college and you're grinding for that potential, training camp opportunity with an NHL team, to know that every other goalie that's reached this elite level has also been through some of these things, whether it's mental challenges or emotional challenges, or whatever the case may be. And they've found ways to overcome it and become better versions of themselves. And you definitely gain a lot of, I feel like it's just a lot of confidence and a knowing of what you said, that you're not necessarily alone in your journey, because you've seen these amazing goalies that you watch on TV, that you grow up idolizing, having the same struggles. And to see that they've moved through it and moved past it and found strategies to overcome all of those crazy challenges that come with being a goalie, it is empowering and it is inspiring. And you start to realize that you're going to find your own answers. As you continue on in your journey, no one's necessarily going to teach it to you, or give you all of those answers. You're going to find those answers just by naturally playing the game. And to know that those answers are going to emerge, again, is an empowering thing. And thankfully, we've had the chance to help a lot of goalies through these books, not because we're preaching a certain strategy or a certain science or anything like that. It's literally just sharing what other NHL goalies have gone through, and their openness, is really empowering for everyone. And so, yeah, that's kind of the impetus and the reason why, we started to write these books, and why we feel they have a lot of value for the goalie community.
All right. Lots of good nuggets in there. Let's start with just pulling out one piece, which is a lot of coaches and players don't understand the goaltending position. And I'd like to illustrate this with a story that Mitch Korn once told me, which was he was a goalie coach. I think it was college at this time. Maybe it was early pro, but he was working with attendees, and one night the goalie gave up a goal, and the coach was like, "You can't be giving that up. You need to be staying on your feet." So, Mitch was like, "Okay, fine. We'll work on that and do that. You're the head boss here. Like, this is your ship. We'll run it." So they work on that. And I think it was like the next week, the goalie gets beat 5-hole because he stayed on his feet. And the coach is like, "That's a terrible goal. You got to stop that." And Mitch goes like, you can't have it both ways. Like, it's either like you're going to have one or the other, like choose which way. And like, just understand like what is truly a bad goal versus which is not. Like, I had a brother, so I kind of have a better idea of like what's really hard and what's not so hard. And which I think shooters study more goalies. That'd be great. Like, I throw content out on my newsletter and on the podcast, and goalie stuff just does not get enough love.
Yep.
It needs more, like, because if you're a goalie, it's fantastic. If you're a shooter, even better.
Right. Yeah. I think, one of the challenges is that goalies face is that sometimes they're hearing a lot of voices from those that haven't actually, like I said, walked the walk. Right. And so I think when you hear voices from individuals that don't put on the mask themselves and don't step behind, players and take shots, it's kind of like, well, do you really know what I'm experiencing? And so there's always this iron curtain of misunderstanding between what a goalie is experiencing behind the mask and what others are seeing. And naturally, as the goaltender, you are the last line of defense, right? So you're taking on this role that comes with inherent pressure and inherent stress, because if something goes wrong in a hockey game and a team gets scored on, where's everyone looking? They're looking at the goalie because they're the last line of defense. Doesn't matter that the puck went through 3 defenders and guys missed assignments and 8 million other things happened between the time the puck was dropped and it crossing the goal line. It's like, oh, well, the goalie didn't stop it. What's wrong? And when you have people constantly asking what's wrong or why didn't you do something that you're supposed to do, it definitely grinds on you a little bit. Because automatically, I think a lot of goalies, and especially at the younger ages when you don't have the experience and you don't have the wisdom of, letting things go and understanding that people may not be seeing things from your perspective. Just generally speaking, there's not a lot of empathy in goaltending because it really does take one to know one. Do you get what I'm saying? So when you have that misunderstanding and you feel like you're constantly defending yourself, or constantly trying to get people to explain how difficult and how challenging it can be to stop the puck sometimes, it wears on you after a while. And again, when it comes to the mental game, it's just trying to manage those emotions because you don't always have someone to turn to that's going to understand what you're going through. Like you said, Greg, there's only one other goalie on the team, and you're lucky if you guys or girls are actually friends with each other and have that open dialogue. So there's just not a lot of places or ways for goalies to be able to express themselves in a way that, again, is safe and is being done with others that also understand what it means to be a goalie. So I think that's why you hear like goalies are a really tight knit group and it's a very small community, because it really is. And even today, with all the analytics and the additional info out there, there's still a shortage of goalie analysis and goalie content and goalie resources. So it is a challenge and it can be difficult, but that's not to say that there aren't places you can go or there aren't resources out there that can give you and teach you some of these strategies that the elite goalies have learned over the years.
Yeah, let's push everyone to In Goal Magazine, which does not charge enough, not even close. They need to raise their prices. Obviously, you got the Goalie Guild and a bunch of other areas to go to. I'll let you list off because you'll know better than me. But I want to talk about bad goals. So let's talk about the RVH goals when someone just gets sniped short sided, like goes off their helmet and in, and everyone's like, "Oh man, what are they doing?" Like, your thoughts?
The RVH and a lot of the post-play techniques are still incredibly successful. You're always going to have goals from bad angles. You're always going to have goals that trickle in and find little holes. It's part of the game. That's how it happens. But if you were to actually look at the statistics of how many dead angle or bad angle or goal line shots are actually stopped in the RVH, the percentage is still very high. So I think what happens, and this alludes to what we were just discussing and what you mentioned earlier, people see those goals, but they don't also realize how talented some of the shots are from those angles. NHL players can do things with the puck on their stick blade that blow my mind on a pretty regular basis. And it doesn't matter if you're 6'8" or you hold your edges until the very last second, or you've got every single square inch of space sealed. Pucks are going to find their way through goalies and over the shoulders and around the head. That's just part of the game. Now, it doesn't mean you just, brush it aside and be like, oh, whatever, it's a bad angle goal, I'm not even going to look at it. You still look at the tape. You still look at like your angles and your positioning and your squareness and all of those things. But to overanalyze it, I think you start to dig a little bit of a hole for yourself. So me personally, as a goalie, a former e-bug, I see the talent and I see the knowledge and the education that the players are getting and that the snipers are getting on how to manipulate pucks and get them up under the bar and find holes in these positions that goalies are in on post play and dead angle plays and wraparounds, whatever the case may be. So yes, goalies are being exposed, but it's still wildly very successful when it comes to, stopping a lot of pucks. So I think you have to be really careful how you judge a goalie just based on one bad goal or one bad RVH goal. It's going to happen. It's still a complicated, tactic. Getting your body into that position is not easy, especially when you have to do it on a dime at a split second. And yes, I'm an apologist. So yes, I give goalies the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time, but I think generally speaking, it's not nearly as bad as some of the analysts make it out to be. It's a really good talking point because it's like, oh, look at this NHL goalie. He just gave up this horrible goal. Let's talk about it. But when you look at the big picture, again, I think it's still wildly successful, and NHL goalies can still get better at being in an active mindset in a passive position, if that makes sense. So like you're getting into this really complicated reverse VH position, and you can still keep your hands active and have an active mindset in that position. You don't have to lock yourself in and be this robotic blocking goalie. You can still find ways to steer pucks or cover pucks, or just keep pucks to the short side. So yeah, that's that's kind of my general thought on it. I don't know if you agree or not, but I think a lot of them are a little bit overblown. They're going to happen, and generally speaking, most of the time, goalies are making saves in those positions.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes like an airplane crash. Like they do happen, but they're actually much safer than if you're driving to all of your destinations. But it looks when it
Yeah.
happens, it's newsworthy.
Right. And
It's
it
kind of
looks
highlight worthy.
catastrophic. Yeah. It looks catastrophic too, because it's a bad look. It's like a Jacob Markstrom who's 10'10", fills the whole net, should not be allowing a puck from that close in. But one thing I learned from, I think this might have been from Mitch, or it was from Mike Valley. So I apologize. I don't remember because it was a long time ago, but he taught me. And as soon as I saw it, it was like, oh my God, now I see it everywhere sort of thing. It's like, you love Jeep Cherokees and you really want one. And then when you go driving somewhere, all you see is Jeep Cherokees, right? So this was one of those things. But the quote was, in the playoffs, especially as the games ramp up in intensity and importance, pucks do weird things. Like you see pucks do things that you don't see in regular season games in the playoffs. Don't know how to explain it. I think it's the intensity. The players are just like, they step up their game a little bit. And it's true for a lot of dead angle plays and pucks that are in tight. Pucks do weird things sometimes. They turn up on their sides. They find the tiniest little hole. That happens. That's part of the game. And so to micro analyze it or over analyze it, I think goalies need to be careful with that. And sometimes it is okay to just brush it aside and be like, you know what, it's a freak play. I'm going to be better next time. I'm going to make sure, I'm really tracking down on that puck, whatever. Like one or two simple reminders on dead angle plays, I think is all you need, and then move on.
Yeah, it comes down to the idea of like what's the correct decision in a situation. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out, but was it the best based on the information at hand, read, etc., all of that. So to finish this little piece up here, let's do a quote from Mitch Korn. Beer pong is a game of shots. Quarters is a game of shots. Playing goal is not a game of shots. It's a game of situations, and every situation you have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Which goes back to that idea of the active mindset that you just talked about. So I love that quote. And anytime I get an opportunity to talk about it, I'm not going to pass it up. So thanks
Mitch,
for bringing that up.
Yeah, Mitch would be really proud because he is the king of those one-liners. And that's a really good one because he taught me this. And I've learned in my own studies and in my own experiences playing that goaltending really is problem solving with a lot of gear on. It's problem solving. Every situation is a new problem that needs to be solved. It may not always result in a shot on goal. But you also have to think of the position as, you're one of 5 on the ice or one of 6 on the ice. So you're a component of a team that's trying to defend a goal. And that's an important mindset, I think, for goalies to understand as well, is that even though you are in the blue paint on your own, and you're the last line of defense, and it can get lonely, you're still part of a 5 or 6 man unit that has to defend your end of the ice. Um, and so being able to work in concert with your defenseman and have that communication and understand where scoring threats are coming from and what possibly might go wrong in a situation, whether you're killing a penalty or it's an empty net or whatever, is part of that problem solving. So, yeah, great quote from Mitch. He's got a bajillion. There needs to be a book of Mitch-isms at some point in time, because maybe that's something that's a project
I think
for
that's
you.
perfect for you. Just, you know,
For me,
a nice
yeah.
little short booklet of that. I'll take 10 pages. I'll pay that one.
Yeah, you've got a few Mitchisms, but yes, that's a great quote, and yeah, very much in line with how I view the position and how a lot of us view the position as goaltending as problem solving.
Yes. So I just want to cover one definition for people out there, because we've kind of mentioned it a few times, maybe once directly and a few times indirectly. But what's the difference between a blocking save and a reaction save?
So a blocking save, I would say, to define it simply, is when you go into a set position before the shot comes. So a blocking mode save is you are basically anticipating a shot in a way that allows you to set your body and not move any of your extremities whatsoever. So you get into a certain stance or a certain position and hold it for as long as possible, even after the puck has hit you. An active stance save or an active save is a little bit of the opposite, where there could be some movement of your extremities, whether it's a shoulder lean or you're reaching slightly for a puck or you're trying to get an elbow on an elevated shot from the ice level. It is having that active mindset that I'm going to actively react and move an appendage or move a body part in order to get behind the puck, as opposed to just getting into one set position, not moving anything and staying there. I feel like that's the
Perfect.
best way to explain active versus passive, or, active versus blocking mode. And don't get me wrong, there are, situations when a blocking mode type save is, adequate and the most efficient way to stop the puck. But for the most part, I think goalie coaches, generally speaking, want to see goalies that are more in that active mindset and can respond to any given situation when pucks do those weird things. If you do give up a wonky rebound, for example, and the puck goes off your shoulder and it's just kind of laying there, you don't want your goalie to just be stuck in a blocking mode and just staying there. You want them to actively reach down and try and cover that loose puck, or reach out with the stick blade and kick the puck away into the corner, right? So it's not necessarily just a physical move. It's also a mental component of, how you approach a situation with your
right.
body. So
Set feet or backflow?
I like a little bit of backflow. I
Oh,
am
okay. I've seen it
I,
go both ways with goalie coaches these days.
I think a little bit of movement is okay. Um, for me personally, it feels better. I feel a little bit more engaged in a play. So what's the old adage we use for stopping breakaways, right? On a breakaway or a penalty shot, it's you match the speed of the shooter when you're backing up. And so that like mindset has always, for me, worked pretty well. And even within the flow of a penalty kill or whatever the case may be, I like to have those short little movements that you see, those short little shuffles, those short little micro adjustments, because it just helps me feel like my positioning and my squareness is a little bit more accurate, as opposed to if I'm maybe don't have a little bit of that flow and now maybe I'm a little bit of behind a play when I'm trying to go cross crease for a pass, right? So those are just little examples, but yeah, I like a little bit of movement, backward flow in my game, at least personally.
All right, perfect. So and anyone who has no idea and is completely lost right now, just Google all of this.
Go to In Goal Magazine. That's all. Go to In Goal
And Goal
Mag.
Magazine will have it. I'll have some stuff on post play and whatnot, like RVH specifically on the Hockey IQ newsletter. So we'll have that for you. But
Yeah, there you go.
backflow has not been written about yet. So we'll leave that as a mystery for people that don't know goaltending and set the stage for them to go find their own answers a little bit.
Yeah, that's
Um, yeah. So where I'd love to go next on this, kind of comes into the global goalie retreat that you do in Breckenridge, which is getting people from all over the world that know their stuff about goaltending into is it a room, or do you guys go out for hikes together?
we do both. We do both. So yeah, it's for me, what I've noticed over the years is that goalie coaches spend a lot of time working with their goalies in a team setting, getting ready for the next game. Right. So win or lose, whatever the case may be, it's a lot about maintenance and it's a lot about making sure skills are honed. What it doesn't provide goalie coaches is a creative space to try new things. You don't get a lot of time as a team goalie coach or an NHL goalie coach to try new things during the season because, again, it's all about maintenance, preparation, getting your guys ready for the next game. So, in order for, and this is me personally speaking, my philosophy is in order for the position to truly evolve in terms of how we coach it, not only do we have to observe goalies because goalies are the ones that evolve the game because they're the ones in the crease doing the movements and problem solving like we talked about, but you also have to create an environment where goalie coaches can come together, learn from each other, share ideas, and then have a space to try new things. And that is what the Global Goaltending Retreat is mostly all about, is creating a safe, private environment where goalie coaches from different parts of the world that have different cultures, different ideas, different ways of explaining things, they come together for 4 or 5 days, and they just iterate and they try new things. And so we do get on the ice. Breckenridge is amazing because it's the highest elevated rink in North America. So not only do the goalies that come out and demo for us, not only do they get an unreal training experience because the elevation is naturally a good constraint, but it's also an awesome space, an awesome environment for coaches to just go out and try stuff that they like wanted to try so badly during the season, but never had that environment because they know if a head coach saw them try this kooky drill or this crazy skating drill, the coach would be like, oh no, none of that. You're not using my ice time for this sort of thing. Right. So the goalie coaches really value that time together because, not all the time do you get a chance to hang out with a goalie coach from Finland for 3 days and learn what they're doing with their top end guys, or a goalie coach from Australia, or, we even have goalie coaches from Mexico come out to this event. And so having all of these different minds and different cultures come together for the betterment of, not only the position as a whole, but how we coach the position is really, really special. And it's been an awesome learning experience for myself to just watch as I create that environment. But for all the coaches that come out, and especially for the goalies, I think the goalies really enjoy it because, they get the opportunity to actually work with these goalie coaches from all over the world and try the new drills that they want to try out. And so it just creates this awesome learning environment and sharing environment where the coaches are creating friendships that are valued because they can kick ideas back and forth without the stress of worrying about whether it looks dumb or, the coach is going to think, something negative of them. And again, we go back to the lack of resources and the lack of, opportunities for goalies and goalie coaches. This is one of those things I try to combat against by creating this environment. So I wish I could do the retreat 10, 15 times a year because the goalie coaches value it so much because they just never get a chance to do that anywhere else. And
All
so,
right.
yeah.
So I got to ask now, you got me curious. What are the challenges that goalie coaches are trying to solve? Or like, what were some of the hot topics the last few years that goalie coaches are trying to solve that is a challenge for their tenders?
Yeah, I think the challenge right now is, well, that's a really good question. Let me think. I think I'll start broader than just like a typical hockey game. Okay, so the challenge at on a broader scale is team practices are not really very good for goalies. Right? We can say that pretty safely. You don't want your goalie facing 2-on-0s and 2-on-1s and repeated shots without being able to set their feet or a million of reps that aren't really conducive to learning specific techniques. There's a lot of good content on In Goal Magazine actually about how NHL goalies just really battle with practice environment because they have to look good and make saves, but it doesn't always support their technical game and it doesn't always support the growth of confidence. So goalie coaches right now, I think, are looking for solutions on how to solve this problem of team practices are not great and we don't always have that goalie specific time to work on things that we need to work on. So you've got to find those avenues somewhere else. So that's one thing, is like team practices are not great for goalies. How do we overcome that? Another broad scope one is just general workload management, because you do butterfly and train a lot during a season and the workload is high. How do we manage the workload so that maybe there's not so much stress and impact on the hips? Because we know that goalies are dealing with a lot of hip issues and a lot of injuries. Look at what just happened to Vasilevsky, and all of a sudden back injuries seem to be emerging out of, I don't want to say nowhere, but all of a sudden we're starting to see goalies deal with some back issues, which hasn't really been a thing for a while. And like, we know that the workload management is really, really difficult. Some NHL goalies are still playing 58, 60 games in a regular season, plus all of that practice time. And you wonder why they have injuries at the end of the regular season, like what happened to Saros, right? So those are two of the more broad scope, elements of the position that I think coaches are really looking for solutions for, is workload management. Practice environments are not great. I think within the context of a game, we're starting to realize more and more how important edge work is, which it's always been important, but now it's just even more important because, again, shooters are evolving and they're changing the angles of their shot releases. They're finding really deceptive ways to mask the shot release and change of direction. And when you have all of this change of direction and, these subtle changes in shot angles and shot trajectory and shot releases, goalies need to be able to rely on their edges that much more in order to be in position and to be patient and square. So edge work is a real hot topic for the goalie coaches that come to the retreat. And in order to kind of support the learning that takes place in that area, what I did is I partnered with an amazing skating coach and edge work coach by the name of Katie Jo West. And she primarily works with skaters on their edge work and their skating ability. But we actually brought her out to teach the goalies something, and the goalie coaches something about how to use your edges. And that was really fascinating because traditionally goalie coaches and goalies don't work with skating coaches, right? Maybe a few will here and there. But to learn from her and have her come out and just kind of be on the ice with us, showing us some of the edge work stuff that she does with her players was really fascinating and opened up a lot of eyes to some things that we can teach our goalies on how to better manipulate their edges. So, excuse me, those are just a few of the things that we've been discussing. And that doesn't even get into the mental game or, the psychological or that component of goaltending, which is, I like to say goaltending is 90% mental. So, the concept of ecological dynamics and skill acquisition, there's a lot of different things out there that we are trying to solve for. But I think I highlighted 2 or 3 of like the real major ones right now. To answer your question, we're not worried about the Michigan very much. We're not worried about that too much. It's a little scary, but I think for the most part, goalies are either just going to push you out of the way or, get their shoulders up. So we didn't spend too much time, very little time on the Michigan.
Yeah, what's in the news versus what's actually important. Edges
exactly.
and the fundamentals never go away. It's the idea of big rocks, pebbles, and sand.
Yeah, good analogies.
Can't fill up with sand, aka the Michigan move. You can worry about that at the very end.
I can tell you're truly children of the corn because your analogies are spot on.
Crazy how that works, but okay. So all right. I want to get to the learning designs and coaching. One thing
Mm-hmm.
before we get there, um, I want to talk on is shooters. So you talked about deceptive ways they're masking shot releases. Can you give us an example or two of what they are doing?
Um, yeah, I see this, and it's a great challenge. It's just this awesome tug of war between shooters and goaltenders. And it's always been happening, but it's just, as I get a little bit older and I learn more context around skill acquisition and things like affordances, and degrees of freedom, these buzz terms out of that emerge out of ecological dynamics. I'm seeing the game a little bit differently now. And I think shooters have gotten one, for example, is just like, I always am interested if a shooter chooses black tape or white tape on their stick blade, right? So is there a reason why? And this is just a little thing, this is a little bit of an anomaly, but like a puck that comes off a stick blade that's got black tape is a little bit harder for a goalie to see. Now, if a shooter uses white tape, I actually feel like it's a little bit easier to see that release because there's some contrast between the puck and the tape, right? So that's a little nuance of a thing that I never used to think about before. And now I actually wonder, I ask the question, does that make a difference? So that's like one little nuance thing that, you know, either here nor there. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to make a huge difference, but it's just something I think about. But ultimately, for shooters, I think there's a lot of deception that's happening, not necessarily just like with the stick blade, but the extension of the stick blade to the wrists. And the wrist action is always really interesting for me because I think as the sticks get lighter, the players can be way more deceptive and really accelerate the release of a shot. And I don't know the mechanics of it because I'm not a shooter myself, but that is where I'm starting to spend more time, is actually watching a lot of the different drills or information online from shooting coaches, whether it's on the coach's site or it's just on Instagram or on some of these other hockey websites for shooting coaches, is actually listening into those conversations and learning what shooting coaches are teaching shooters. And a lot of it is about deceptive releases and, shooting angle of your body and all the different kinematic chains of the different body parts that come into play in releasing a puck. And it can also be about where the skates are pointed. All of these different little information sources that reveal how a shot is going to come off a stick blade and hit the net is where goalies and goalie coaches are starting to spend a little bit more time, because the more we learn about that, the more we can learn about how to better be prepared for it, if that makes sense.
You bring up a great point here, and I'm going to try to simplify this down to an ism. I'm going to start revac isms hopefully soon. The puck does not tell you anything. If a goalie just looks directly at the puck, you will have no idea what is about to happen. You need to look into cues into blade angles and
Mm-hmm.
body. I call it body shape. Like, how is that person shaping their body for the shot? And those are the actual things you need to be looking at, not keep your eye on the puck, son.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe all the way into the glove, like that'll be helpful. But more often, if you're trying to gain hints into where that puck's going to go, where the shooter is thinking about firing this, the puck, you know what? Take the puck, literally just have your goalies take the puck and just keep asking it questions all day, every day, until they come to the point of like, okay, coach, I get it. The puck literally doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
I can't do that. Maybe I should go ask the shooters or be looking somewhere else, because nothing that you see or, being told by the puck, which is obviously nothing, actually gives anything away. So I think that is a key point that you bring up there is, where are you finding these little things? And I think for like shooters, like changing a blade angle is always great. Like you get it best in the NHL when they do like shootouts. The guy has a closed blade, and then at the last second he just opens it up. Goalie drops his hand and goes right above, and it's like, okay, that's fantastic. Or the old like, I'm gonna open my body shape where it looks like you're gonna go bar down, and then suddenly it's 5-hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Yeah.
always really fun.
Yeah, that's an awesome point about, the puck not telling you, where it's going to go. And I think, for a while there, goalies got really, really excited about head trajectory and puck tracking. And I think we got a little bit over focused on just tracking the puck. And then you started to see a lot of goalies with blinders on, right? Like when a horse is in a stall and it's getting ready to bust out of the gate, they have blinders on so they can't see the other horses next to them. And I feel like I see that with goalies sometimes. They're so focused on tracking that puck into their body that they lose information that's really vital to a play and to reading a play cleanly, because they're not looking at anything else. They're not leaning on their peripheral vision. They're not leaning on those subtle little clues and cues that you mentioned earlier in terms of like what the shooter is doing and what affordances a shooter has when they look at a goalie. And so, yes, I think a lot of solutions that goalies are looking for in terms of like how to get square to a puck, how to manage a player that's dragging a puck towards the middle of the ice and then shooting it the opposite way. Those solutions emerge out of the play naturally itself. And if you just give yourself the best opportunity to make the save by reading the play, not just tracking the puck, if something does break down or the puck does get redirected or, a player comes from the side and out of a blind corner and all of a sudden just cuts directly in front of your view of the puck, you're aware of that potential, problem. And so, yes, I agree. I think goalies sometimes get too narrowly focused on the puck and they lose sight of the bigger picture, for a lack of better terms. And that is where that problem solving comes into play, and that ability to just realize that the cues and the clues are coming from the shooter itself, not just the stick blade and the puck. So widening that focus and having a little bit more of a stronger IQ by reading plays. Um, yeah, that's one thing
Yeah.
that we definitely are trying to teach goalies is just getting better at game IQ, hockey IQ, goalie IQ, whatever you want to call it. It's a little bit of a lost skill, and it's our job as coaches to create environments where goalies can really train that.
Oh man, I'm going to continue to tease that because that's where we're heading next. But I got one last piece here on the shooters. So I think it's really fascinating. Like shooting's all about like puck movement, right? Trying to get the goalie's feet. Like that's kind of the current understanding out there. I think shooting and scoring off the carry is incredibly difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
I always find it hilarious. Like if you watch a shooter, they usually go right at the goal, which means they're going right at the goalie. But I see some shooters doing some really interesting things. Like Nathan McKinnon is a really good example. Tage Thompson does this a little bit as well. Of their final step is either across or it is down towards the goal line,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously a goalie's trying to get set, and then suddenly you're going to go to a goal line. Now you've got to readjust to the three different like angles that you need to kind of squareness, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really fascinating. If like how are shooters trying to get the one up, because most of the time
Yeah.
shooters just go straight at you, and then it's like okay, you just play the shot, and if it's close, it's blocking, maybe get a little more active. But I think Nathan McKinnon there, since you're in Colorado, we'll use him as
Yeah.
the prime example. Like he'll just make this one final skate push towards the goal line and then beat
Mm-hmm.
you short side, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I think first of all, Nathan McKinnon is a scary individual. When he's carrying the puck with speed, just look out. We've seen it a million times. And I think one thing that he does really well is, like you said, at the last second, he's forcing the goalie to extend. And when you force a goalie to extend, whether it's a leg at the last second or an arm at the last second, you're creating holes. And excuse me, when the puck is in tight like that and close to the net, the distance that the puck travels when he's pulling it to either side is greater than if the puck was 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet away. Because when the puck is further away, you have to move less. That's just geometry 101. When the puck is in tight and it moves a lengthy distance, you're forced to extend. You have to lean a shoulder. You have to pull an arm out away from the center of your body. You have to pull your knees apart from the center of your body. And I think that's where he's just opening up holes, and he has the strength at the last second to manipulate the puck, whether it's elevating it or finding that gap in between the skate blade and the post, right? So the ability for him to come and attack with speed is already putting goalies on their heels a little bit and forcing them to be extremely patient. And while they're trying to track the puck, that last second adjustment or that last second pull or an extension on either side from McKinnon, especially a guy like Tage Thompson, who's got crazy reach, but actually maybe a shorter stick than you would think. It's very deceptive, and it's extremely difficult because, it's all happening in such a split instant. But I would see a lot of times, especially in the years when the Avs had Grubauer and Francouz was healthy, those were two smaller goalies, and it was really apparent that he was able to open them up a lot of times because they were smaller. And so those last instant extensions was really forcing the goalie to pull away from his center, and just open holes. And it's hard to make that save when you're, right on your goal line, or it's the very last moment when you're expecting one thing and then something else happens. So McKinnon is really good at it. Tage Thompson, I love that you mentioned him, because I just saw the piece online about, the stick length, right? Like, he's this lumbering human being, and he's using a stick blade that, I'm barely 6 feet tall, and I would use it. So, or a stick that's much shorter than you would expect. So yeah, I think the shooters are extremely intelligent, especially at that level. And a lot of those things you don't necessarily see from watching on TV, but when you're live or up close, you really see it. And it's incredibly challenging for goalies.
All right, we're on Zoom. No one's going to be able to see this, but I'm going to share my screen here so we can look exactly at what I'm thinking here. Like how McKinnon really never skates directly at a goalie. I think it's incredible. So this one right here, he's going literally around the goalie, which is incredible at an NHL when you're shooting from above the hash marks.
Yeah, and the puck actually comes off his stick blade, and he's got one skate in the air, right? So there's just that extra movement that can throw a goalie off.
Yeah, or then this one right here, he's skating at the goalie, and then you see the last minute push off the left leg, where instead of going at the goalie, he's now going at the goal line, and again he's able to go around the goalie a little bit, get that short side. Stupid good, absolutely incredible.
It is. I mean, and that's the thing is, when you slow it down, or you really take the time to appreciate the subtle movement and the subtle shift or the subtle changes, you're like, oh wow, that's I can understand how that is a really hard shot to stop. But when you watch it at full speed, you're like, how do you get beat short side there? The goalie's there. It's like, well, you really got to take a look at one, understanding just the pace and the speed of which these plays happen, and then just the release itself is ungodly fast. That's why he's Nathan McKinnon, and he's making millions of dollars.
That's how you get paid. Yeah. You're no longer dealing with 7 figures. You're going to 8.
Right.
So what's another way that shooters can make life hard on the goalie? For me, I've always heard when in doubt, shoot it in the goalie's feet. Always hard to sort out feet, especially within movement. That would be the common idea that I would have. But from your perspective, what's something that you're like, damn it, stop doing that? It's really difficult for me.
Yeah, I think I won't just say individually the shooter. I think there's a couple of obvious things. But for me, honestly, what I'm seeing a lot of now is, how do I put this? One thing that really bothers me is shooters are also getting better at shooting in between the defenseman's feet. And I actually just posted a video of this on Twitter or X or whatever a day or two ago. I was having a conversation with an analyst, and he was like, oh, there's a new metric that they're tracking. It's between the leg shots. And he was referring to a shooter that actually puts his or her stick in between their own legs and then tries to roof it. I was actually thinking of something totally different. I was thinking of shots actually through a defenseman's legs and how difficult that can be. So I think one thing that's really challenging is just any time that you can use your own defenseman, your own player, or another player to slightly take away the eyes of the goalie. So being able to shoot just directly on the outside of a leg, or like I said, in between a shooter's legs, Doesn't have to be a hard shot, doesn't always have to be 100% accurate, but if you are able to somehow release a shot that forces a goalie to have to look through or around or in between something, your chances of success are going to go up. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And that's not just a one-on-one thing. So I apologize that that's a little bit circumnavigating your question, but I'm just thinking generally right now, what grinds my gears and what I'm seeing more of is exactly that. Is shooters, I think, can think about this. And again, I'm not a shooting coach, so I don't know. But I just wonder how much time is being spent like looking at those situations, and does it pay to maybe take a little bit off of a shot velocity in order to screen or complicate the goalie's ability to track it cleanly from the moment it comes off the stick blade until the moment it hits the net. And if you can somehow find a way or get better at shooting through or just around or in between or whatever, you can't stop what you can't see. And you don't always have to see it 100% of the way for it to be deceptive. So even just, let's say there's a guy right in front of a puck and you're shooting between the legs, that instant of that puck coming off the stick blade, if it's passing through something, it's taking away your vision for that split second. That might be all you need in order to just barely miss it, or excuse me, just barely not be able to get a glove or a shoulder or an elbow on it. So yeah, I think for me personally, that's the one that's grinding my gears the most right now, is those deceptive releases that are going through legs, around legs, and through bodies.
It seems like there's less traffic at the net these days. Like there's a lot more like moving screens or arriving at the
That
net
is,
on time
yes.
rather than just sitting someone there.
Yes. Yeah.
Curious of just like, there's that element because it used to be like you put someone at the net, they stay at the net. I forget the guy in Detroit, like that was like his job. Like he was
Thomas
ungodly.
Holmstrom. Yeah.
Yeah,
Holmstrom was,
just sit there.
see, and you bring up a good point. And so I love hearing this because I think it makes me feel like I'm not the only one seeing this. But the mid to high slot redirects where guys are just floating across the Royal Road or the center of the ice, looking for these opportunities for those high or those mid slot directions. Those are killer because the goalie has already read the release, the original release. So they're anticipating or they're moving into a lane, and then it changes 50, whatever, however many feet away from the net, high circles, high slot area. Excuse me, those are killer. And I see shooters even getting really good at turning their body and deflecting pucks as it's coming past their body. And that also is extremely complicated for a goalie because, again, you're already starting to move into a certain pattern or a certain stance or a certain shot lane. And then someone's buzzing by you, or I don't want to say by you, but is buzzing through the low slot or the high slot area. And their body is turning as this puck's coming by, and they're able to get their stick on it or get a body part on it. And it just completely changes the trajectory and the pace of that shot. And those are killer. Right. And so you're at least probably creating a bad rebound where the goalie's all of a sudden sliding out of the net and the puck's going the other way. I mean, it just causes chaos, and we don't like chaos. We like structure. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot more of in the past couple of seasons is the high mid slot, and then players actually crossing the path of the puck, turning their body and finding a way to get a stick on it. And yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, real fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, as a shooter, love it. As a goalie, not so much. So we've talked about this a few times, and I'm finally ready to go there. I think we've shaken a few things out of the trees. Talking about learning design. I'm not going to say coaching design or practice design because really we want not just to coach and teach, but we want what we're teaching and coaching to actually be learned. So I'm going to call them learning designs.
Mm-hmm.
From a learning design, you've already talked about like CLA, ecological dynamics, all these big buzzwords. So one, we'll simplify those down. Two, how do we go about teaching this stuff to goalies? because there's the technical side of the game where you kind of need to have certain movements that are very repetitive. But at the same point, you're talking about, okay, we're not getting away from that because it's almost too robotic and
Mm-hmm.
into the UC Saros, the Devin Levi's of the world,
Mm-hmm.
where the reading and how we develop reads actually occurs.
Yeah, I think, well, that's welcome to the world of Justin Goldman. This is what I'm studying daily, is how do we take these awesome emerging ideas around, practice design and skill acquisition and actually efficiently and effectively correlate it to goaltending, which is such a niche position in a niche sport. And um, the answers aren't there yet, which is really cool and fun and exciting because it's emerging as time goes on. And I think you can take these basic principles of ecological dynamics and skill acquisition, like you mentioned, the constraints led approach, which is becoming much more popular and much more mainstream in hockey, and look at situations where it makes sense to try and add constraints to a goaltender in order to open them up to new solutions that can organically happen in a game. Like we just talked about, the game is chaotic. There's a million things. There's a million variables that you have to account for when trying to make a save in a game situation. And a lot of it isn't just strictly the puck coming off the stick blade. Like I said, there's 9 other players on the ice that are going to interfere with your shot lanes and your decision making and where pucks might go. And so trying to break that down by adding constraints is a very difficult balance or line to kind of tread, because the best drills in hockey for goaltenders are the ones that are the most realistic, right? So you don't want to do drills on plays that aren't actually going to happen in a game. Why are you doing it? That's a waste of time, right? So the trick is to find something that's realistic, that actually happens in games, but can also allow for creative problem solving and for constraints to be added. Whether it's like, okay, you're going to do this drill without a stick now. That's a constraint, right? Or the constraint is that you have to start facing the boards and you have to turn around and then find the puck, right? That's another constraint. So it's kind of, that's why we call it learning design, because the goalie coach is no longer just a coach that's going to spit out the answers and tell you to do this, that, or the other. The coach's goal is to design a drill or design a situation where those solutions will naturally emerge out of the play or the drill that you're creating, right? So it's fun because there's a billion different ways you can do that. But the way that's the most effective is by having a conversation with your goalie, giving your goalie some agency and saying, hey, what do you see in this situation? Like you asked me, what do you see that's really, really challenging for goalies right now? And when you give your goalie some agency and you listen to what they say about the problems that they struggle with the most, therein lies your answer in terms of how you can apply constraints to a drill or, again, a learning experience. And
All
so,
right, my glove hand sucks. How do we make my glove hand better?
okay, how do we make your glove hand better? Well, first thing is, like, what type of shots, what situation gives you the most trouble? Is it a backhand shot? Is it shots that are coming to from a certain area of the ice? Those are the questions I would ask first. Is like, okay, let's break down the specific situation in which you say your glove hand sucks. 2, I would actually look back and be like, I'm going to go look at the tape and see if his glove hand actually does suck, because you may feel something, but in reality, it's not actually there, right? But if you're really adamant that there's this one specific situation where your glove hand sucks, we would look at that situation and say, okay, how can we replicate this in a way that makes sense? And then from there, you look at how to apply constraints. So maybe one of the things I'm going to do is, what do we see goalie coaches do sometimes? They bring out white pucks, right? So we use white pucks. That's a constraint. The puck's normally black. We're going to make it white so it's harder for you to see it come off the ice and into the glove. So maybe that's one thing that we would potentially do. But
Such
then
a
you can
pain in
argue.
the ass to pick up off
Yeah.
the ice after the fact. You're like, where's the pucks at? Can't find them, and hopefully the
Right.
the Zamboni doesn't pick them up.
Or they get, the pucks start to look a little gray because they've been shot so many times, so they don't look, they're like off white, right? So that's one very basic example, is like, okay, the constraint is the puck's a different color. Now you're being forced to actually track it all the way into your glove, and maybe we've isolated a tracking issue. Okay, and so then you start to look at the visual acuity system. Hey, Greg, have you ever gotten your vision tested? Well, my vision's 20/20. Okay, well, there's 20/20 vision, and then there's actual sport vision. There's a lot of different things that come into play when we talk about, your ability to track pucks. There's divergence, there's convergence, there's a mix between the two. So, hey, maybe we've actually isolated that it's not necessarily a glove hand mechanic issue. It's something with your tracking. Maybe that's the solution. So that's where the problem solving comes into play. And that's where the agency comes into play, which I think is so important for goalie coaches to have with their goalies. Is it's a two-way street. You can't just look at a goalie and isolate a problem by looking at it. You have to have a conversation with the goalie and make sure you truly understand, where their challenges lie. And that's built through a relationship. And when you have a strong relationship with your goalie, and he or she feels safe enough to tell you what they're actually struggling with, because they're not worried about getting benched or you thinking that they suck, that's where the learning takes place. And that's where the practice design becomes much more efficient, because you pinpointed things that actually matter. So there's a million different ways that you can, solve for this problem you have, Greg, of your glove hand sucks. And maybe we've isolated it's a tracking issue, and we're going to go see a vision specialist just to get a better idea of where your vision's at. That's happening with a lot of goalies right now. We read articles about Devin Dubnyk doing it in Minnesota. And more goalies now actually go and get their vision tested and do vision training away from the rink or away from the ice as a way to combat that potential issue. So yeah, we've done some learning design, right? We've applied a constraint by using white pucks, and we've isolated that your vision's just not that great. We can get that fixed. So you're okay. Your glove hand does not suck, Greg.
There we go. All right. I love the example that we give here. We're not just pie in the sky type guys over here. Right. Just fantastic. And that's really where we're going with this. And everyone is a goalie coach. If you're coaching a team, like, you have a responsibility to all of your players, not just your skaters, and making sure that we're designing activities that are relatively game-like, having the pretzel as a warm-up where every shot comes down from the middle, probably not helpful.
Right.
Let's get rid of that altogether. That should be out of all practices. Like, how do we give situations where goalies have to actually make reads in some shape or form? Like, that's critical. So don't forget about your goalies, everyone. They are people too.
Well, hey, and I will say on the flip side, and here's the question I'm asking, okay? And I've bundled it all down into one question that I have for you. If the goalie drill is not realistic for the shooter, is it realistic for the goalie?
I mean, off the top of your head, everyone's going to say no, right?
Well, that therein lies the problem that we have to solve is, hey, if the shooter is just being asked to, okay, you're gonna here's a pile of pucks, and I want you to shoot glove side high every time, and the shooter's just like, okay, pulls it, and exactly what's going to happen. Is it really alive? Is it really realistic? I don't think it is. So now you're not just looking at goalie drills through the lens of just the goaltender. You also have to consider the affordances of the shooter, because if the shooter isn't feeling challenged, or the shooter knows exactly where he's going to place the puck every single time he shoots a puck, it's not really alive. It's not really going to challenge the goalie in a way that's going to allow them to authentically solve problems. So one of the big keys for goalie drills, we talked about white pucks. That's a constraint. Another one is just variability, just different types of releases in different locations, so that the goalie isn't just automatically assuming it's going to go to the same place every time. That's where the robotic, quote unquote, robotic stuff comes from, is the rote repetition of the same shot going to the same place the same way every single time. Now, when you mix it up and you have repetition without repetition, and you have some variability mixed in, now the natural problem solving rises to the surface, and you see it in the challenge that the shooter and the goalie has one-on-one. Now it becomes more game like because the shooter has some agency to shoot where he or she wants, and the goalie has to respond to that authentically without knowing exactly where it's going to go. So it's trying to take that idea and incorporate it into a training program. And that's why we say goalie coaches are designers. They're not just coaches.
All right. I love this. I'm going to try to summarize this at a very high level so we can wrap this beautiful sucker up, put a little bow tie on it. We want to create tigers that are able to go out into the wilderness. Okay. We want natural tigers. We don't want zoo tigers where we know exactly where our food's coming from, where it's going to be every single day. We want zoo tigers that got to go hunt, got to figure it out, read the cues, hunt it down, and make it happen. So
that's damn dude, that's actually really good because I think of it as like domestication, right? You lose those natural instincts when you become domesticated. Yeah, sure, maybe life becomes easier, but when you're tossed back out into the wild, okay, and you don't have your structure and you don't have your goalie coach telling you exactly what to do you have the ability to authentically solve problems? And we see a lot of goalies that are great practice goalies. They get into the game and you're like, what happened? Well, this is the problem that this is another one of those overarching problems we're trying to solve. So you put it perfectly. I think that's an awesome way to explain it. And we don't want that. We want tigers. We don't want zoo tigers. Very well put.
yeah, we want jungle cats. Okay,
Jungle cats.
yeah,
Yes.
jungle cats and zoo tigers. That's what we're going with.
I love it.
Awesome. All right, so just lightning round here off top of your head. Last bit here. Mitch Korn life lessons. Go.
Be where your feet are. Okay. Mitch Kornism. This is a good. So be where your feet are for goalies themselves. You're not in the NHL yet. Dominate the league that you're in right now. Coaching, Mitch Korn. You don't know it until you own it. Okay. You can do all the scouting you want. You can do all the analysis you want. You can look at all the video you want of a goalie. You don't know him until you own him. I think that was the one that really stood out for me that it's always in the back of my head when I'm watching goalies or scouting. You just don't know exactly what you've got until you've got it. And you're never going to know the full picture.
Beautiful. All right, Justin, this was fantastic. Appreciate you coming on. 30 seconds. Where can people find you, etc.? Go buy your books off of Amazon. I'll put it in our hockey'sarsenal.com book recommendations. I think I already have one or two of yours already up there. I'll make sure they're all in there.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Yeah, thegoalieguild.com. That will link you to Lift the Mask, to my books, to my Git book, where I've got all my resources and education and content. So thegoalieguild.com. And then I'm also on Instagram. That's Instagram and the Twitter machine now known as X. All at the Goalie Guild.
Beautiful. Thanks, Justin. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate you taking the time.
No worries, man. Thanks for helping me shake off the rust. It's been a while since I've done a podcast like this, so I appreciate it. Awesome conversation.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.